welcome to another show. Today I'm talking about Daredevils and documentaries, which goes from climbing Everest to Evel Knievel to street racing to NASCAR going to Le Mans to a space jump. Just lots of people doing stuff that's weird and odd and most of us wouldn't do. But it's interesting watching a documentary. Because it's a certain type of person who might be crazy to do these things, and it's like, well, it's interesting to watch. I'm not doing any of them. You know, like, I can drive, but I like driving at normal speeds. I don't like doing weird speed racing things. I don't like heights. I wouldn't climb Everest or jump from space. So it's like, it's full of stuff that I would never be caught dead doing, but I'm interested in seeing the people who would do it. So I'll start off with Being Evil, because that's probably the darkest of the bunch of documentaries, because it is about Evel Knievel, and it's a thing that even the documentary makers have to admit that Evel Knievel was a bit of an evil git at times. You know, and it's like there's just no way around it. It's like even the people making this documentary are like, yeah, he was horrible sometimes. He just wasn't very good to people. So it's about how Evel Knievel started off as a kind of small town criminal who turned his life around, I think, into bikes. And so and because he was always kind of a hustler, I mean, you get feeling the hustle was half the thrill for Knievel of getting people interested in the idea he had. And the execution was only half of it. Half the time was just selling to somebody for him. So you get into the habit of doing these bike jumps, where he started off with a team around him doing the jumps, but realised that it was very expensive and they could just do stuff himself. And if he made it big enough, that would get the crowd in, so he didn't have to, like, if he made it life-threatening, people would come in to see the crash, basically. So that became his gimmick. And he didn't always make the jumps. Sometimes he would crash and break legs and do all this other stuff. But it was just a gimmick that's selling the Evel Knievel with the American flag. Well, very kind of southern kind of American flag. Get up. And being that hey kids, I'm Evel Knievel, so you could sell a lot of toys. A lot of toy deals, do all these crazy jumps, and he created an image for himself during the 70s that he was Evel Knievel and Evel Knievel was cool, and kids, don't try this at home, but I'll show you how I did it. And slowly but surely his sense of himself becomes tied to Evel Knievel. He becomes a womanizer. You find out his family life wasn't great because they bullied his wife, like, horribly. Like, he seemed to see women as objects rather than people. And he spent the money as quickly as he made it. Rather than saving it all up, he spent it and spent it and spent it and loved spending it on the next big thing. So when everything collapsed, he had no money left. He couldn't pay his mortgages and things. And it was like, shouldn't you have just kept the money and paid the mortgage off, and then you'd been in much better shape? No, I thought you'd always have toys forever. Well, basically, he got into trouble because someone released a book. He did this thing where he was going to try and fire a rocket over a canyon and land on the other side, which made him nervous because he'd sold this idea before he thought about it and realised it was a very dangerous idea. And during this time, it was very difficult to go on with because he was nervous about dying because he thought he'd gone too far. And someone wrote a book about him this time, how terrible he was to people. And he went with his friends and beat this guy up publicly and ended up spending 7 jail time for it, which destroyed his reputation. All the toy deals died. He was no longer, hey kids. And it was a Hulk Hogan of the 70s, is the best way to put it. And everything collapsed. He lost all his money. He ended up living poor for a long time. And his reputation finally came back up as other daredevils followed in his footsteps and did, like, skateboarding and doing weird jumps as well. And so he got to live off that a little bit. But the documentary looks into his whole life, and it's like, he was a git when he was young. he created an image of himself, but he probably was never really that far from the original self. He just thought it was easier to look law abiding. He still liked the idea of the conning people out of money, but he could become wild and wild about doing these massive jumps. Obviously, an adrenaline junkie. Probably not that smart, but he thought he was. So it was an interesting documentary about a guy who you would not spend any time with. Like, even the people talking about it, like Johnny Knoxville, who produced the documentary, who was influenced by him for Jackass. It doesn't mince the fact that, he was a problem behind the scenes. Like, his personal life, he did things that were horrible. He tried to find some peace later on and mellow out later on, but it still was like, you're trying to make up to people who have legitimate grievances against you for some of the horrible stuff you did when you had money, when you didn't have to care about people liking you or not. Because that tends to show you what you're really about. So, yeah, there wasn't much forgiveness for him. And I'm not surprised, because I wouldn't have forgiven him for some of the stuff he did either. Right, next we go to Apex, the secret race across America. This is about a race where, if you remember the films of Cannonball Run, or Cannonball, which was the low budget version, or Cannonball Rally, which was Roger Corman version, it was just all about these cross country races that they were doing, where you had to avoid the police and get from New York to LA, cross country, as short a time as possible, avoiding police, finding different routes that would get you there quicker, and just doing anything you can to get an advantage, like having two drivers so you could switch drivers so no one had to sleep, but one driver had to spot the other driver and give them the routes, so even if you were having rest, you weren't sleeping. And eventually that whole thing, because the films came out and were comedies, that the police were too wise to it and said, okay, we're cutting this down. So eventually it just died off in the early 80s. So the race across America was coming back in the 2000s with better cars and thinking, we're going to do this again. So it's about the first attempt to do it, like to break the record and show the record could be done, because there was a record that no one was quite sure how they did it. They want to say, prove one, the record could be done, and two, we're going to break it. And it's about that attempt. The first attempt fails when the car breaks down halfway across America, and the second one is the base of the documentary. The second one, the guy doing it, and it's about the creating a car, make sure it won't break down again, getting a co-driver who's really up for it, who really wants to do it, and getting a documentary crew to document it all and make sure that everyone knows what happened and where, and to keep all the receipts so they can prove I was here, 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 and here when I said I was. And it's about the process of, you're doing a cross-country race and you're stuck behind a slow car on a road that's only one lane, and there's traffic lights and there's the roadworks, and how even though you're really ahead, something that can really slow you down for half an hour, and just the general problems you get trying to do it and thinking, is there a problem with the car, is a problem with this, a problem with that, and it's about the kind of intensity it's all in your mind trying to make sure you get there. So it's an interesting documentary, but also looks at the people who did it before, like the people who did the Cannonball stuff earlier, and how crazy a lot of them were, and how it was just this obsession with doing this. And they even admit, this is stupid, there's no actual reason to do this, I just want to do it, I want to do it again and again. And some people did it knowing they would never win it. It was just like, I want to do it to experience it. So it's interesting, the mentality of the situation, how they actually do it, and the tactics to avoid the police. And it's an enjoyable documentary. It's not an amazing documentary, but it's enjoyable, and it is a weird subculture of human behaviour that I would never do, but it's interesting to see. Now we go to American Thunder, NASCAR To Le Mans, which is about, in Le Mans, which is a 24-hour race, there's some competitors are always in it, the Ferraris and all the rest of it, who know what they're doing, and they put a car out every year to win Le Mans. But there's also a thing where a newbie can come in at a certain space in the grouping. There's there's one or two of these places in the track that you can have a new competitor in it. And it's like, well, and NASCAR tried in the 70s and failed completely. And they were always a bit sore about that, and they wanted to do it again. So they converted a NASCAR car into a Le Mans car, or the better car, using their engineers to do a car that could run for 24 hours. They did not care about winning. They thought that's too much anyway. We just want to finish and not come in last. That was the whole thing. And it's about the process of doing it and getting the drivers interested in the challenge of it. So they got professional drivers who had done like professional races, not NASCAR, but actual proper drivers who had done the races before, Le Mans races and things. They'd one NASCAR driver there as well, but the other two weren't. But they would teach them how to do the thing, do the variations. They could teach them about the NASCAR's, their strengths and weaknesses, and everyone kind of came together to do this challenge. And it's about the process of how difficult it was to do and how stressful it was, because no one was quite sure they could pull it off, but they all came together and all had put money into it to create this car that could go at NASCAR. And the documentary is just about that. It's all about the hopes and dreams of these people doing this. And it's a nice little documentary. I mean, it's not too long, but it gives you a sense of the challenge. It gives you a sense of why it was difficult, what the problems were, and the success of, they came in out of like 55 or 60, they came in at the 39th, which was much better than expected. The car didn't break down. It was the loudest car in the whole race, because the NASCAR cars are loud. But they've succeeded. It worked. The attempt worked. So it's a nice little film about a challenge that people did. It's not going to blow you away for being the most amazing documentary you've ever seen, but it's a nice little film. And now I'm going to go to Space Jump, which is the shortest of these films. It's only about 50 minutes long. It's about the attempt to do the space jump from high in the stratosphere and all the challenges of getting a man up there and then do a jump, and the problems of all the spins if you're jumping that high, because if you're spinning you're going to die. And how do you keep your body a certain direction so you will not be spinning when you get to the point where you need to parachute? And also the problems with pressure. Like, you need, at a certain point your blood boils, you need a pressure suit. You can't just go up with a normal suit, obviously. Oxygen. Like, how do you up to that far, which they use a balloon for? How do you record it also, people know you went as far as you can? And they did it as a live YouTube event as well. So you get bits from YouTube too. There's too much of YouTube stuff actually, because I was more interested in what they were doing. The YouTube stuff was just so they could record it. We're saying how amazing it was. Yeah, it was, but it's just people watching a screen. It's not that interesting. The interesting thing is the guy doing it. And I mean, the thing, it was the first attempt for like 30 or 40 years, and the guy who did it before, whose record was going to be beaten, was actually part of the team helping this other guy do it, which was a nice little touch. And it's just about the challenge of doing that, and how do you do it, how do you manage it, and how do you create it safely. And it's all the jumps you have beforehand as well to figure stuff out. It's the same with the NASCAR documentaries about like much of it is about failing, and then you slowly figure out the problems, and you succeed slowly over a year or two trying to figure out what the flaws, what the mistakes we made, how do we do it, how do we solve the problem, and it's slowly surely an engineering problem. How do they fix it? How do they deal with the pressure? How do they deal with the spins and all these jumps he has to make beforehand to at different heights to try and figure these problems out before he does the big jump. So it's a really interesting documentary. It's about 50 minutes. I highly recommend it, as long as you can get through the YouTube stuff about how amazing how all these people watch YouTube, blah blah blah. It's like, who cares? It's about a jump that's amazing, not YouTube. The thing about the NASCAR, not the NASCAR, the cross country across America and the space jump is the records after the films were made, were beaten, and they actually included it in the films. Like, these records were beaten later on, but these were the first to do it for a long time, so they set the new standard that other people had to try and improve on. And finally, we're going to the big one, Beyond the Edge, which is about the mechanics of climbing Everest. Now, Everest is the world's tallest peak. Now, according to a lot of climbers, it's not actually the hardest climb for like routes and things, for how difficult the climb is. It's because of the altitude and the weather. There's only so much. It's like May you can climb Everest. And the rest of the time, it's a waste of time to even try because it's too terrible. And even then, you have to acclimatise to the weather and to the altitude, and it's hellish. It's utterly hell enough. And this was the first one, and it's about the attempts that failed beforehand, and now it was like an attempt led by the British. So Edmund Hillary, who climbed it, who was the first man up, wasn't the lead climber. He was just a New Zealand climber who people knew was a good climber, because New Zealand have mountains and have had their own problems, so he'd learned to climb on ice, so he knew how to do a lot of stuff that the British climbers didn't know, because they came from Britain, which have less high peaks, and so they hadn't done ice climbing as much as Hillary had. So he was a guy who went and set up camps and created routes all the way up, because he was like known as one of the best guys. But he was not the first ones who made the attempt. The first ones were these two guys who had dealt with the oxygen and done this new oxygen thing to help the breathing edge way up to Everest, which had failed, so they had to come back, and they had failed, so there was only one more chance to come up, and that was Hillary and his Sherpa guide. And they climbed and they made it, and they just made it no more. They were only up there for a short time, took photos, and then came back down. And there's no actual photos of Hillary on Everest, because he didn't want photographed. He took the photographs of the Sherpa, he took photographs from Everest, but he didn't take photographs of him on Everest. Which is an interesting thing. And it's about how they did it and what the difficulties were. Now, Everest is still a very dangerous place to climb. A lot of people die in Everest. Now they have like these tour climbs they have, because they've done it so often. But people still die in it, and then essentially the Sherpas have to do a lot of the work. Like the big criticism now is if the Sherpas weren't there and it was just the people doing it, most people would not make it to the top. The Sherpas do a lot of the heavy lifting, and there's a route that's been created to get up that's easier than what Hillary did, and there's a way up, and now it's been established. But if you're doing it the first time, there's no way up. There's like things you have to improvise, and you had to find ways through things that no one else had encountered. And later on, people could find ways round, but at the time they couldn't. So this is all about the problems with the oxygen, because the oxygen in Everest is so high that it's very difficult for the human body to take it, because the human body needs certain things in it that no longer exist when you're that high up. You know, we find oxygen, it's just like there's low oxygen in the high altitude, and it's just like, nope. So you have to kind of work around that by having oxygen masks for a certain amount of time. And now there's some people who can do it without oxygen masks because they've acclimatised themselves so much to that, which is why the Sherpas had an advantage, because they knew how to acclimatise to that high altitude that we're not ready for. So you have to go up there for a long time before to actually be able to climb it, to adjust your body to it. So it's still a hell of a thing to do. Still very difficult. It still can kill you. So yeah, that's a very good documentary. You can catch it on various like Amazon or iTunes and things like that. It's available all those places. So as recommended. It's probably the best documentary there is. Out of all of them, I think this is probably the best one and the most interesting one. But yeah, I would definitely, if you watch anything from this, watch this one. This is a good one. So I hope you enjoyed this video of these different Daredevil documentaries. I tried not to go into to all the details on them so you can enjoy them when you watch them. I just try and give a rough idea what they were. But go watch them. They are good. Right, bye for now.